Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to In Time. My name is Lamar Soutter, and with me, as always, is Ansgar the Hat Odinson.
Well, hello. Well, since you called me the hat, I've got it.
I saw that. I like that. I like that. The little tip
Yeah.
of the hat. We should maybe do those segments. I actually had something else for you. I'm going to try to come up with like a unique one for every time, but it's like with all the work we end up doing, it's sort of like, oh yeah, I got to come up with something clever to say about Ansgar, and just like, okay,
$400 introductions suitor.
Or yeah, Nick. Well, Nick got 400 in. Yeah. Oh yeah, my introductions are worth about a $1.50. But I've heard that I can actually expense my introductions for 120 each. So I'm considering that. That was a rumor I heard, that I can just expense in time for that. So I'm looking forward to it.
And I've also heard that it doesn't matter what your qualifications are; you can just charge whatever the hell you want. Oh.
That is the case, as I understand it. So expect a what is it, a bill in about 2 years.
All right, cool.
Now
Gotcha.
All right, and of course now I'm getting like loads of messages. So we have a lot to cover today. We're going to be discussing among other things. So the impeachment is over. He's been acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Big surprise, right? Big
surprise.
Well,
and sort of, yeah, one of our frequent viewers has pointed out that, okay, so we've had a trial, and I guess this is now the American way that we do trials. There were no witnesses. There was no real evidence. It was just people arguing for a little while, and then he just, and this is what I said, it's been my experience that you're supposed to decide the verdict after the trial, not before it begins. But
that's
I think
what I
really wanted.
thought.
I know.
That was the impression that I had, but apparently I was very wrong. Trial means that you decide, and then you afterwards you basically arrange some sort of a show to make it entertaining before you actually announce what it is you had decided before, even though it's rather transparent. That's what you had decided before. That's the trial.
Hold on, let me look that up real quick. So that's oh yes, another word for that is circus. So yeah, that was helpful. We also we're still following the Volcano. We have done a lot of coverage of that. We're very proud of that coverage. It turns out, and I had found out recently, we've been able to get in contact with a few people who are actually over there, and they haven't been told any of this. Their news has been reporting this really rather differently than ours has, and that's
what I understand. It's very much like nothing to see here, everything's okay, right?
That's what I've heard, and I think some of them have actually now. Our show has actually gotten to a few people who have seen it, and we don't want to be alarmist. We didn't want to be alarmist. I think we covered it well, but they were shocked, and they're like, "This is not what we've heard." And they were in areas where ash was falling, and they said, we were told we were completely safe, but now it turns out we're not. Now, we've spoken with Mr. Knoll, who was on for, I forget if he was on. Yeah, he was on for that one, I think, and we have discussed what he's got to say about that. But he's been talking with us a bit about it. And one of the things that he says is, in particular, and we've been following this, what has happened is the volcano seems to have subsided and it's getting quieter. So that's a real problem, because that's what it does oftentimes right before it blows. But what people do is they think, hey, it's quieter, everything's okay, and they start getting closer to it again. It's a bit like people who hit the eye of the storm and they're like, wow, the storm's over, no problem. And it happens, he said, with tsunamis too, which is the water starts to recede and people are like, oh, everything's fine. They go, the water's receding because there's a huge wave that's coming up. And so he said, it's getting quieter, and the concern is that the government that hasn't been informed, just has not been informing them of the danger, that government is going to say it's okay, and they're going to get closer, and it could cause more fatalities. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We will do another broadcast on that shortly, as is needed, but that's obviously unfortunate story. I think that's just about what we had to cover for house cleaning. We do want to remind people we just had our Patreon hangout. We're going to have another one. We rely exclusively on Patrons. We've had offers. Dollar Shave Club is after us like there's no tomorrow. I wonder why. But
yeah, they're like, please
Pornhub,
shave that mess off your face.
yeah. So Pornhub has been after Ansgar. They're not as interested in me, but with Ansgar, they're just like, listen,
well,
can we?
it's mostly the hat. A few of the porn stars that they really really want to do a video with the hat. But then I told them that I had to come along with the hat, and they said, fuck it. And not
yeah,
like,
okay, we're done. Okay,
you'd want them to say, "Oh, fuck it," more of a
and then they said, and then we were offered sponsorships for that. We've had Pornhub and a few other porn related websites that said that they were willing to pay us money to keep Ansgar off of their sites, and we still declined. But anyway, we're Patreon supported. We hope you guys will join us on the Patreon, and we talk to our patrons regularly. They get cards. They're a big part of how we operate. We listen to them and get their feedback, and they give us ideas for shows. So we hope, and we have the regular hangout for patrons. So we hope you'll consider that. In the meantime, enough plugging this. This episode, I think you and I have both been looking forward to for a while.
One last thing to plug.
One last thing to plug. What's the last thing?
Next week, we've got a new show. We talked about it yesterday, too. We have a new show airing next week. Yes, we do.
What's airing? What's airing next week? I haven't heard of this.
Mystery host.
Oh, well, we do mystery host, and it's a brand new show. It's still an in time brand, but it's going to be done a bit differently, and I'm looking forward to it. I will be there. I will be watching, but I'm not going to be in the. This is going to be a little weird. Yeah. So that's a week from today, actually. Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. So today we have on, you and I are both fans of space program, I think in slightly different ways, as usual, but we both are. And we have a guy who has a channel basically dedicated to specifically rocketry. And I think his interest does tend to be more towards rocketry, but this is his wheelhouse. I've been dying to talk to him about this. So please, everyone, welcome Reds Rhetoric to our show today. Reds, how are you?
Thank you very much for having me. Good to be here. It's fun. It's great. We're gonna have a great show today. This is gonna be awesome. By the way, to both of you, thank you both for having me here and having such poor standards.
Yeah, well.
No, really. I've been a huge fan of your channel. One of the reasons is you get into the nitty gritty of rocketry and the space program in general, mostly rocketry. And to give you an idea what a fan I am of this kind of thing, I forget how long ago it was. I think maybe 4 months ago. They finally. California has been a potential launch site apparently since the inception of the space program, but they've never used it. And so they finally used their California launch site for the first time. And so for the first time in my life, I got to watch a rocket launch live, actually in its presence. And I am not ashamed to say that I cried. It was a moment in my life. And so rocketry, the space program, this stuff really means a lot to me.
Yes. When you're actually there and you see these engineering examples of pure badassery doing what they do best, which is just being badass, you kind of stand there and all like, this is probably as close as it's ever going to get to a religious experience, because that power is just amazing. It's like also the first time you feel like the sonic booms, and especially on a landing launch for SpaceX rockets, and you have like not one, not two, not three, but 4 sonic booms in rapid fire succession. It's just an amazing experience. It should be a bucket list item for everyone.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I would love to go see more launches. I really, really would. And the idea that, you know, there's this testament to human engineering going out beyond our atmosphere, that is freaking amazing.
Oh yeah, and you know that all this power, all that knowledge and engineering that goes into making these rockets fly, you know, it's absolutely amazing. You know, the sound, the excitement, it's all there. And then what it amounts to is this dot in the sky known as the International Space Station going so beautifully across the sky from horizon to horizon. You're like, that is where it just all comes together. So imaging the International Space Station, filming rockets as they're taking off, it all comes together to make something absolutely amazing. And it just shows that humanity is actually pretty amazing when we're not being dumb and, you know, doing dumb things.
When we come together to you know, achieve a goal, we can do some pretty badass things, like put, you know, robotic laboratories on alien worlds.
Yes, exactly. You know, that's exactly what the InSight mission is. It's a robotic laboratory on Mars. Curiosity, robotics, Spirit, Opportunity. You know, these robotic pioneers are showing us things that we didn't think we would ever see. It's like, hey, you know, it's hard to believe that all this time ago we were looking at this red dot in the sky, and now we're getting up close and personal with it, and, you know, putting it underneath a microscope with a robot that we placed on a different planet. It's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I'm gonna add. I use this one a lot because I do a lot of counter apologetics, and one of the things people do is like, well, science isn't all that. Okay, look, we followed faith and religion for 98,900 years. About 300 years ago, we developed the scientific method. We've done more in the last 300 years using the scientific method than we did in the first 100,000 years before that combined. And what we've successfully done is taken a man from Texas, gotten him, he was living, breathing in Texas, gotten him off of this planet, which is spinning, by the way, and is round, just in case some people had some questions about that. We got him to hit a moving target that is also spinning, and is moving around us. He was able to land on that, get out, do a little jig, get back in his ship, come all the way back, land back, and then get him from Huntsville, Alabama, back to his home in Texas, alive and in one piece. Oh, wow, this whole shenanigan thing is going around a sun, which is in a galaxy that's spiraling out in an expanding universe. We got him to do that. We did that. Nobody can take it. We did that. That was science. Thank you. Done. That's the human race. I mean, that should make you cry, and that we are doing that. I mean, yeah, I'm proud. We talk about people to be proud of that we got that done. So and I don't think I asked you this. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted because I just wanted to set up a meeting that we were trying to get organized. I'm back. I do apologize for multitasking. So what is it that you do? And sort of, you know, what's your personal interest in this, and how have you been sort of, who are you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so my name's Red. I originally got into this to debate people who think the Earth is flat for some reason, and it just spiraled out of control from there, I guess. And I went on a mission to document all things NASA and space from my own equipment, my own cameras, my own telescopes, to show that there is independent verification to show that NASA, SpaceX, ULA, and other space, you know, companies and entities are doing what they say that they are doing. They're not scamming you. They're actually putting stuff in orbit. And, you know, this is easily provable to anyone who actually gives a damn to check for themselves. That's what I do on here. I do flat Earth debates sometimes on my channel, as well as another channel called Fight the Flat Earth. I recommend you all subscribe to him. And when I'm not debunking flat earthers on the internet, I am busy making videos about, for example, measuring the distance to the sun, recording rocket launches, measuring the altitude of the space station, and stuff like that. So
now
that's what I do here.
You successfully actually measured yourself. You didn't rely on anybody else. You measured. I think you had a partner with this, but you did measure the altitude of the space station independently. Nobody told you what it was. You were able to actually measure it.
Yes, correct. The way that we were doing, well, actually a bit of backstory on that. A common claim that you will hear flat earthers make is that the space station exists, but it's not in space. It is a high altitude aircraft like a drone or a spy plane, and it exists to fool observers on the ground like you and me and anyone else who happens to be looking at that particular part of the sky at that particular time. Now, a good way to test that is to see if it's at the altitude that an aircraft would be, or if it's at an altitude that is impossible for a plane to reach. So depending on its altitude, you can very accurately come to a good conclusion on whether or not this is a plane or not. If it's higher than a plane could possibly reach, then we have an object that's in space. If it's at an altitude that is possible for a plane to reach, then we know it's not in space. This is an aircraft, not a spacecraft. So the way we did this, and by we, I mean myself and another YouTuber who goes by the name Astronomy Live here on YouTube, also recommend you all subscribe to him as well. We decided to use the transit of the moon to measure the altitude of the space station. And what that is that if you are looking at the moon, and you are in the right place at the right time and looking at the moon, you will see the space station go right in front of the moon. It will pass in front of the moon. Now, if I'm in one location and my partner in this, who is Astronomy Live, has a telescope also looking at it a little bit down the road, like let's say a kilometer, he will see it pass over a different portion of the moon. That is called parallax. It's the reason that we have depth perception. So what we did is we used that principle to get what's called a parallax measurement. And from that, we could figure out how far away it was from us being the observer. But we also know our altitude angle looking up at the sky. With those parameters, we can construct two triangles in which we can figure out the altitude of the space station. It's on my channel if people would like to see it. The video is called ISS Finding the Altitude QED Edition, if you would like to look it up. And I'm sure you guys will post a link to it in the description. Hint, hint.
I think we can do that. I think we can do that.
Oh, yeah, sure. We can shill for this clown. Okay, whatever.
Sounds good.
So, all right. So, okay. So
stuff,
now,
of course, we can chill.
that's true.
Yeah.
All right. So now I do want to I want to get into a lot of stuff, but let's talk about sort of. So I think all of us here have a huge appreciation for the space program and sort of what it means to us as a species. Carl Sagan, I think it was Carl Sagan who said, basically, if we don't find a way to get off of this planet and colonize somewhere else, we're dead. We're gone. We can't stay on this planet forever, and we're polluting it. And that's just, you can't not do. We have to move. So what is it about this that you find so fascinating, to the point where so you go out and you're filming these things, and you've got a huge archive of filming these rockets launching and getting tested. So I guess it's a two-part question. Oh wow, this is going to be in many parts. But so what is it that you find interesting about it? And no, let me start with that. Sorry, please.
What I find interesting about it is just the overall fascination with discovering what previously was unknown. The fact is that even within our own solar system, we do not have the answer to a lot of questions about it. So if we continue space exploration, we will discover new things that we didn't previously know, and that is amazing. So, for example, I wanted to know for the longest time, what does Pluto look like? What does the surface of Pluto actually look like? We had some good, really fuzzy, blurry, the best we could possibly do images from the Hubble Space Telescope, but that was nothing compared to what New Horizons was able to give us. We were able to, for the first time ever, get detailed imagery of the Plutonian surface, as well as the companion Charon. And we were also able to discover new moons. Also, the Cassini spacecraft, we were able to get the first ever images from the surface of Titan, with Cassini and the Huygens pair. We were also able to discover new moons embedded in the rings of Saturn, and that equaled, I think, over 3,000 scientific papers written by that one spacecraft alone. That was 3,000 scientific papers worth of information that we didn't know previously, and now we do know it because of that mission. Whenever we launch a new spacecraft into space within our solar system, or even around the orbit of the Earth, we learn something new, and that's what's exciting about it. For example, the Parker Solar Probe was going to actually get really close to the sun and get really detailed measurements about the close atmospheric conditions of the sun, our star that we are orbiting around. ESA is about to launch another solar observer, which will get the first ever images of the poles of the sun. We have never gotten images of the poles of our sun, and we're about to do that with this next launch that's coming up on a Atlas V rocket. All of these things are things that we didn't know previously, and every time we discover something new, I get excited about that. So that's why I'm so interested about it. It's just we're constantly discovering new things, and when you couple that with just the engineering badassery of rockets, what's not to love about it?
A controlled explosion. That's the other. A rocket is basically there's an explosion, but they managed to direct the force at one. So you're on top of a big piece of explosive. You're a little guy, huge dynamite, just boom.
Yes, it is a big explosion.
One of the things that I hear a lot, is that all this costs a tremendous amount of money, and what's the real benefit? So what is the actual benefit to spending all this money on a space program?
Most of the money that was spent on this was spent for, dare I say, very poor reasons, because we were having a dick measuring contest with the Russians, and that's the reason why we spent a lot of money on it originally. But as of right now, NASA gets half a penny, actually less than half a penny, for every dollar that the government spends. And for that, we get a window into the universe. Another thing is that we have spin-off technologies that go into, for example, cancer research. Some of the imaging technology that was used on the Hubble Space Telescope was implemented into cancer research. The amount of diamond-hard material science that went on the space shuttle missions, and later on the International Space Station permanent missions, were also spun off into like anti-scratch coating for glasses. And since you two are wearing glasses right now, I think you're very thankful for that right about now. Also, CAT scans. The imaging technology was pioneered during the Apollo era. LEDs were pioneered during the earlier space shuttle era. So up until, I think, STS-95. We also have installation technology, water purification technology, LASIK technology, which helps us nowadays discover things like gravitational waves at LIGO. That was all pioneered at JPL as well as on the International Space Station. And all of these benefits translate into the medical science. I already mentioned research, but also osteoporosis, not just curing it, but reversing it. Alzheimer's, not just curing it, but reversing it. This type of research is currently happening right now on the International Space Station. And the reason why it's there is because this type of research happens to be easier in a zero-G environment. Who would have thunk it? If you have a laboratory with this type of environment that cannot be replicated anywhere else, you can make discoveries that you weren't able to make previously with ground-based research. This is where space becomes a vital window into the future, and the future is looking pretty great. And the technology that was also pioneered during NASA went into like artificial limbs, the internet itself. We wouldn't be having this show right now if it wasn't for the spin-off technologies that NASA was utilizing during the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Space Shuttle, and now the Artemis mission is now benefiting from the groundwork that was set back in the past by NASA and its subcontractors. A lot of spin-off technologies we take for granted nowadays, some of it we don't even know was a spin-off from NASA. But next time a person needs a CAT scan, or next time you use your laser mouse, be sure to give NASA some kudos for that, because without them, your laptop wouldn't be working right now with that mouse.
Well, and I'd like to actually point out two things real quick. I think Ansgar has another question, but I wanted to point out two quick things. First of all, NASA was actually NASA is not allowed to copyright. Sorry, trade. Not even trade. Wow, they're not allowed to keep the proprietary rights on anything that they invent. They are actually a public organization, so everything they do it has to be completely transparent. In fact,
yes.
if you said, I want the blueprints to the space shuttle, they are required to send you the blueprints for the space shuttle, because they're actually beholden to us as a private as a publicly funded company. So they were a part of making Velcro. And they could not patent Velcro, because even though they made it because they needed it for space, and they didn't actually make it, they actually bought it from somebody else, but they popularized it, they made it available to everybody. That's because they couldn't actually patent it. So they're not making a huge amount of money that they would be making off their own discoveries. But the other thing is, just so to reiterate sort of where you were, NASA's budget has represented, and I think typically it's actually gone down. Well, okay, so right now it is 0.48% of the U.S. budget, where our military is 57% of our budget. And don't get me wrong, I do believe we need a military. I'm not sure we need to own 95% of the foreign bases across the planet, but we do need a military. But if you were to take out 1% or just 1 point of the military budget away and put that into NASA, you would triple their budget, and they could probably accomplish a great deal more. And I don't think it would affect the military quite so much, but I find that interesting. Anyways, I apologize, Ansgar, if I cut you off before a question.
I actually was going to say, that alone is a huge thing, because imagine the medical technologies that NASA helped pioneer. Imagine if those technologies had been developed in a proprietary way. Look at how much some pharmaceuticals cost because they're proprietary. So imagine if, imagine something like the CAT scan were entirely proprietary technology. That would be a game changer in a bad way for the medical industry.
Yes, there's the developments in, for example, tire design, chemical detection, imaging technology. Hell, even your smoke detector is using technology that was originally developed for purposes relating to NASA's goals, and they weren't proprietary at that point. They could be. That's why they're everywhere, and that's why they have saved a lot of lives. Chemical detection for CO2 detectors. They have also saved a lot of lives, and that technology, a lot like the smoke detector, was not proprietary at that point. It's like, oh, well, this is actually a really good idea. We'll take that, thank you very much, and we will use it for the betterment of all of humanity. And if having all these good things come out of having a window to the universe, if all these things come out because we have a window to the universe and it costs less than half a penny for every dollar the government spends, dude, why are we not funding this even more is my question.
Why are we even having this discussion? So I think it was in 2016, it was decided that the U.S. would, for most intents and purposes, privatize our space program. We would pay other companies to get us out into space. We'd still be exploring space, we'd still be doing work out there, but we would not. And we're actually paying the Russians to get us up many times, which I think is probably a bad idea on several fronts. But nonetheless, this has paved the way for some innovation from other companies. Elon Musk has done a good deal of work about that. What is your opinion on the privatization of the U.S. space program? Has it pros, cons? Is it worth it? And what's been the result?
I think it's absolutely worth it. And also competition is also very good because SpaceX isn't the only dog in this fight. You also have ULA and the newcomer, which is Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin, who actually beat SpaceX to landing a booster after it went into space. It was a suborbital launch. There's a lot of debate about that, but let's face facts. Bezos won, albeit with a much simpler single stage rocket and only going straight up and down. But whatever.
And if I can interject on that, so up until now, basically what's been happening is when there was the shuttle. So the shuttle was a bit of an exception, but up until the shuttle, at least, the way the rocketry worked would put a man on the rocket. The rocket would go up, boosters would fall off, they'd go to the ocean, they're gone. They get up, the stages would fall off. Those you can never use again. They get lost, they get destroyed, whatever. He'd fly a ship over to the moon. He'd leave half the ship on the moon. He'd come back up. They'd come back. Most of the ship would be destroyed. They'd separate from that. They'd leave everything but essentially the command module. They'd come down in the command module. That would land in the ocean. They'd get out. That would sink to the bottom of the ocean. So on the entire process, the only thing that's reusable is the astronaut spacesuits.
The astronaut spacesuits, and for the most part, the main orbiter of the shuttle. But the shuttle was, in my opinion, inherently flawed in many ways. But getting back to the main question, then I'll get back to that absolutely because it branches off into that. Privatization has led to competition and also some people wanting to just say, you know what, I can do this and I got something to prove with it. When Elon Musk said that we are going to do first stage boost back and recovery, everyone said that it was practically impossible. I mean, the math just did not work out in that way, but that's when Elon Musk would eventually go on to develop his own engines and his own method of doing things, which was called load and go, which was not how it used to be done. So basically, the very moment the rocket is topped off, boom, get going, you're gone. Because that's when the fuel is at its coldest, and colder fuel is denser fuel, which means you can get more in the tank. So he just had a way of doing things and showing that, yes, reusability is a good thing, and this can be done. And if it could be done, you drastically lower the cost of going to space. If you can reuse a $45 million booster instead of having to invest an additional $45 million into a new first stage booster, that is a huge plus when it comes to driving down the cost. Unfortunately, NASA was constricted by what they could and could not do because they were underneath the thumb of the US government. SpaceX doesn't have those restrictions.
Are you saying that I shouldn't buy a new car every time my car runs out of gas?
Yes, absolutely.
Shit.
I know.
Okay. All right, we've broken ground here. We have established that Ansgar, after the show, you and I need to talk. Mostly, I need to figure out what your source of revenue is that you can actually even pose that question. We're gonna talk, buddy, because I've been profoundly misled here. All right, I apologize, Reds. Please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So NASA is underneath a lot of restrictions about what they can and cannot do. I fully believe NASA and their engineers have the capability of doing what NASA has been able to accomplish, but SpaceX has more freedom because they are a private entity. And if a private entity can demonstrate the feasibility of such technologies, they can go ahead and make their own version of those technologies, which will only make things better in the long run. So if we go ahead and let the private sector work its magic, they're going to try to one-up each other. SpaceX is going to one-up ULA. Then ULA is going to try to one-up SpaceX. And then Blue Origin comes into the fight and goes, hey, player 3 has entered the game. I'm going to one-up both of y'all guys. And then they start having a three-way competition over who can make the most efficient, the most reusable rockets. Who wins at the end of all of that? We all do. We all win at the very end of that, because that means the cost of going to space is lower, which means we can get more shit done. It's going to be cheaper in the long run. It just works out to be a better thing all over the place. And then NASA can focus on what NASA wants to do, because they don't actually care about rocketry. They care about exploration. So if they can focus all of their resources not making new rockets, but on equipment to put on top of those rockets, they can actually do more with that. They can actually do more with their budget, more with their time, and we can make more discoveries that way.
So it sounds like you're saying that NASA still has a role in all of this, but it should be more in the scientific discovery, exploration, experimentation side of things, not in the engineering of rocketry and ship design and things like that.
The only engineering that they should be doing is engineering when it comes to stuff that's going beyond this world. For example, the Parker Solar Probe is an awesome piece of engineering badassery. Curiosity rover is another example of that. Cassini, it's my favorite spacecraft because I went around my favorite planet, and Saturn. NASA should be focusing on that because that's what NASA likes to do, and that's what they're good at. NASA is putting their next rover on Mars. That's going to have a drone. It's going to have a drone that's going to fly around on another planet and get aerial imagery and topography maps of its surface. That is amazing. That is what NASA should be focusing on. And using the private sector rocketry to get it there, since they have already demonstrated that they are not limited by what government tells them they can and cannot invest in R&D wise. So they have demonstrated that not being limited in that way allows them to do more, have more capability. And that's why we have reusable boosters now and soon to be reusable engines on the ULA Vulcan rocket, or the demonstration that you can fly a booster multiple times from Blue Origin, because Blue Origin flew that one booster to space 6 times. 6 times they had a successful launch and landing of that booster. Six times. That shows that this type of push towards the private sector when it comes to rocketry is actually a good thing. It'll be cheaper. It will be, in my opinion, more reliable. And NASA can focus on what NASA does best, making equipment for exploration and discovery.
So, what it sounds like you're saying is that we now do have the ability to, if an asteroid's coming towards us, actually get Bruce Willis on it and save the world.
Absolutely.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
yes.
All right.
That's what we need.
So
Bruce
now
Willis and rockets.
Bruce Willis is, yeah. Oh God. Well, and I actually, to tell you the truth, I was such a big fan of NASA. I actually did it's called the young kids version is called Space Camp. If you're in high school, it's the NASA. You go down to Alabama and you spend 2 weeks learning about it. It's amazing. I did that. I loved it. And we did we got into the actual simulators used by NASA astronauts, and we tried. I was constructing something, accidentally dropped a node, took out half the space station. It was a mess. But at any rate, so I've heard, Reds, that you have a marvelous working relationship with Elon Musk.
Yeah, whoever told you that is a liar.
He's a big fan of yours, as I understand it.
No.
So
you
record regular launches of many of these privatized rockets, including SpaceX rockets. And as I understand it, there was a little kerfuffle over something you recorded. Could you maybe tell us more about that?
Yeah, that launch was very weird. Yeah. Okay, so
not to put you on the spot or anything, and we're only going to broadcast this. No, Reds, we're not going to broadcast. This is just between you and I, just between us. What happened? You can trust me.
Why do I not believe you?
Son of a bitch.
Ansgar, have you been speaking with him? What have you been telling this man?
Hey, listen, nothing that he can't pick up off your Twitter profile.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, nothing that isn't already pretty well known by just about everybody. All right, all
Oh,
right. So
geez.
it's between you, me, and the rest of YouTube. What happened?
Okay, so there was a rocket launch that was scheduled out of Cape Canaveral for a SpaceX Falcon 9. Now, the SpaceX launch in question, let's see, it happened on March 4th of 2016. This launch had been delayed not one, not two, not three, but 5 times, which means I drove a total distance of 650 miles back and forth to this thing just to see it go off. It was delayed 5 times. We're gonna launch. No. Oh, it's gonna go. No. Oh, it's gonna go. No, it's not. So anyway, it finally happens. It finally launches, and everything seems to be perfectly fine. And I know what to expect. I know what I'm looking at. I have a decent idea of what the little dots represent on my camera screen. And the 2 dots flake off of what is called the second stage that eventually carries the payload to orbit. And these 2 dots are fairings, and fairings encapsulate the satellite in the lower portions of the atmosphere so that it doesn't damage the satellite from all the wind forces and breaking the sound barrier in atmosphere, that kind of thing. When it's in vacuum, they split apart and they fall back to Earth, and their job is done. Now that the satellite is exposed to the vacuum of space, there's no risk of damage, and so they're no longer needed and they are discarded. Now, in order to maneuver in 0G, there's 2 ways of doing that. You can use gyros or you can use RCS thrusters. These thrusters are cold gas thrusters, and they spit gas all over the place in different directions that allow you to orientate your spacecraft at will. Now, I saw this happening with the first stage rocket, which was completely expected because at that point, they were fine-tuning the technology for landing their first stage booster. So you see the first stage booster spitting all these thruster gases out from itself, and it was a great show. But then I didn't see this in real time. It wasn't until I actually got home and reviewed the footage that I saw it, but I saw a puff of gas coming from the fairings, these things that encapsulate the spacecraft that split apart when in vacuum and are discarded. Why would these sheets of metal, let's just call it that, it's more complicated than that, obviously, but these sheets of metal have a gas puff coming out of it? And then I saw it again. These were RCS thrusters from the fairings. What I saw and what I recorded before anyone else outside of SpaceX knew that they existed was them doing R&D for fairing recovery. These RCS thrusters were maneuvering the fairings in such a way in which they could eventually go through the atmosphere in a controlled manner, deploy a parachute, and be captured and recovered so they could be reused. I was seeing them develop R&D for reusable fairings, which had never been done before. And this was, by the way, secret. SpaceX hadn't yet revealed that this was even a thing, because they don't want their competitors to get a jump on them for making space an even cheaper endeavor. So when I posted this footage, I posted it and it was great. At that point, my rocket launch videos weren't really that popular, maybe 2,000 views each. So I posted it and it was great, and I thought nothing more of it. Then I got posted on Reddit. And let's just say right after that, Elon Musk had to confirm that, yes, we are experimenting with fairing recovery, and fairing RCS is currently a thing that happens on our rockets. I'm the one that broke that story, and Elon Musk hates me to this day because of it.
Well, as I recall, there was a bit of an exchange where, yeah, they were upset that it got broken early, and in fact, and this may have been rumor. I may have misunderstood. I was on the periphery of this, but did somebody ask you to take that video down, or did that never happen? Am I inventing
No,
that? I
no,
could be just inventing that.
no one told me to take the video down. However, I did get a communication from, I guess, a field ranger on something, and I thought it was a joke. Honestly, I'm like, you don't work for the range. They wanted to make sure that I wasn't filming it from NASA property because that could have been a big no-no. And I'm like, nope, I was in a public park across the pond. I was 14 miles away from you guys. I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, oh, okay, carry on then. Just the mere fact that they had interest in where I was filming from was a little bit weird to me. But then it happened to Astronomy Live during a recent Atlas V 551 launch. He filmed it from the base, and he was told that that's a big no-no. But everyone else that filmed it, they were allowed because they can't do anything about it. They're filming from a public place. But the fact that they messaged me about it leads me to believe that they really didn't like the fact that I captured what I captured. And Elon Musk was like, but I wanted to reveal it to the world. Why does everyone have to ruin my fun? So that was an interesting history of my rocket launch filming.
You mean like he revealed the bulletproof glass on the smart truck?
Yeah, it didn't exactly work out for him. So basically, I broke the story before he ever had an opportunity to. And I don't think he wanted to break the story so soon because he didn't want his competitors to get a jump on him and say, oh, well, if Elon's developing this technology, then I need to develop that technology too. Now, I don't know of any other entity that is experimenting with reusable fairings. Most of them just ditch them because they're seen as disposable. So it didn't really amount to anything in that aspect, but it amounted to Elon having to reveal a little bit earlier than he would have liked. And that was because of footage that I captured. It was amazing.
Well, and if they fail, he's still experimenting with them. So if they fail before they've been revealed, nobody knows, and it's okay. If they caused anything to go wrong, then you could say, well, there was a technical issue. We can't discuss it, but there was a technical issue, and it was on something new that they were developing, and there's no issue. But now that everybody knows, people want to see if it works. And if it doesn't, that's a problem.
That's why I think Elon had a bit of a headache with the press, because the main mission always is to get that customer's payload to orbit, get supplies to the International Space Station. The landing is always secondary. But what did the mainstream media always focus on? SpaceX fails to land their booster. SpaceX fails to recover a fairing. I go, that wasn't the point of this launch, you idiot. It's to get the payload to orbit, and it worked. We did what we were supposed to do. Why are you saying we constantly fail when we completed our mission? So I can imagine there's a bit of frustration.
Well, the news is sad because the news really loves spectacle, and payload delivered successfully for the thousandth time isn't a big news story. Elon fails to do X, Y, and Z. Now that might actually get somebody to buy your paper.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why End Time is different. We care very much about getting the story right, and we don't sensationalize things. But I would like to get back to, why do you hate Elon Musk? Why are you out to destroy SpaceX? And why do you hate America?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Breaking news.
With a straight face, no.
Yeah, why do you hate America? I go,
why do you hate America?
Why do you hate America? I go, listen. I am all for America. I will drive my electric power chair through a McDonald's drive-through alongside anybody. Okay, that's just the way I roll. The fact remains, though, is that SpaceX does rockets in, I don't know if you noticed, outside where people can see them. So I just decided, hey, you know what? since, it's done outside and I can see them, might as well record it while I'm there. And it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. Not only that, but it equals a lot of, it equals what I said previously. Now I am the one making the discovery. Now I am the one that is able to reveal something that no one else knew besides me, at least outside of SpaceX.
Okay, so one last question.
I think that's cool. Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
No,
one
no,
last
I just
question,
thought that was cool, but please.
Before we start kind of wrapping up here, do you have any? I'd like to get your thoughts on what the future of space exploration is. Where we're going to be going, and kind of what your projections are for the future of NASA, for the future of private space agencies. Where do you think this is all going?
It's all going in a much better direction than when it was. And I'm going to go over a little bit of history, starting with the space shuttle. The space shuttle was supposed to be America's next big leap, but in reality, it was extremely flawed. I love the space shuttle. It is once again a piece of engineering badassery, but it was inherently flawed in many ways. Once those solid rocket boosters are on, they're on, and you're along for the ride whether you like it or not. And if something goes wrong, there was no abort. And this is why we had
if I can interrupt that. So the solid rocket boosters, because it's solid fuel, once it's ignited, you cannot shut them off. They will burn until it's all done.
You cannot shut them off. Once they're on, they're on. There's no throttling. There's no turning them off. They're on, and you can steer it. That's the only thing you can do with solid rocket boosters. The only reason they're used is because of their performance to weight ratio. They are very good performers when it comes to the act of pushing. But once they're on, and they're inherently dangerous because of that. And especially when you attach them to a craft that has no escape system, none whatsoever. So if anything were to go wrong, you're kind of screwed. And that's exactly what happened during the Challenger disaster. If you used shuttle-based technology, but you put it in a more traditional rocket-like shape, like what's currently being developed by NASA called the SLS, they would have survived. Because the SLS is equipped with a launch escape tower, which, by the way, I filmed the testing of in Cape Canaveral. And it was a successful test.
Did you release more secret footage, Reds? Are you Reds?
Until they figure out until they figure out how to launch their stuff inside and with a wall between me and them, they're gonna have to deal with it.
Oh wait, hold on. Okay, hold on. FBI wants to speak with us, Ansgar. I hope it has nothing to do with
it's no coincidence he's named Reds, and he is filming our space program. I'm just saying, not trying to draw any conclusions.
Oh, shots fired. Okay.
Shots fired. I swear. But anyway, as I was saying, the space shuttle was NASA basically admitting, I think, that they have stalled. They have stalled, and they need external help. They need innovation from people who aren't limited in the way that NASA is limited. And now that they have invested a lot into the SLS rocket, which I'm excited for and I can't wait, it'll be the most powerful rocket ever. It will be more powerful than the Saturn V. It took a lot of political sway and a lot of political fighting to get that accomplished. Elon and Bezos and Tory Bruno, they don't need that type of approval because they don't have that type of oversight. They can just do it. And so what's going to happen over the next few years to over the next decade is Elon is going to invest in the Falcon Super Heavy, which will be a not partially reusable, but a fully reusable rocket that can even be refueled in orbit. We are going to be investing in the Boeing Starliner, as well as the Dragon crew capsule. Sierra Nevada Corporation is also going to be investing in the Dream Chaser, which will be a cargo plane, which can also be modified for astronauts and even be a potential lifeboat for the space station. In the future, we're also going to be developing even bigger rockets to get more payload into space at a much cheaper price more often, thus increasing the constellation network that we have access to. And this is why SpaceX is utilizing their launch platform for their Starlink constellation, which will give internet access no matter where you are all over the planet, which has benefits on its own because internet access can quite literally save lives. And we'll also be developing technology which will make humanity a multi-planet species, where we will be able to set up, you know, settlements on other worlds, which will not only give humanity a bit of a, you know, an insurance policy, you know, in case, you know, they all decide to hit the big red button all the exact same time, all the, you know, most powerful nations, that is, we have a bit of an insurance policy there. But because we have a permanent presence on other worlds, that will increase the amount of science that can be done, and the more discoveries will be made that way. And also, if private companies are working on the space travel technology, NASA can be more focused, more laser focused on the discovery aspect of it, which is developing technology that would be beneficial once you get there. Everything looks amazing for the future, and I cannot wait to be there to film all of it. And you can do that by helping me out. You can do that by subscribing to my channel, maybe becoming a Patreon for my rocket launch videos. You know, gas ain't cheap, gas ain't free.
What's
you know,
your channel?
Help.
Yeah, if you're traveling 120 miles to film these things, holy shit.
100,
what's your channel?
Hang on. Correct yourself, Nick. 160 miles each way. Sometimes multiple times for a launch when they scrub.
Get in the box
Jesus.
of shame, Nick.
It's not just a box of shame. I'm getting bullied on my own. Wow. I don't piss Reds off, man. I'm sorry. Okay, 160 each way, folks.
There is a lot of work that goes into this. I demand respect, damn it.
Ansgar demands respect all the time. I don't bother, but in this case, you got to do whatever you say. Wow.
Yes, to answer the question directly, the future is great. The future is bright. You can help me out in documenting every step of it by going to my channel and subscribing, or becoming a Patreon of mine. And my Patreon is only for rocket launches, so you'll be helping out that endeavor specifically when it comes to documenting these engineering examples of pure badassery. So if you would like to help it out, I'm sure they'll post a link to it down below.
We will. We're going to have, and we're also, could you just say it just so that in case anybody mirrors this video, it's where is, I mean, or your channel is
Reds Rhetoric.
Reds. That was hard. So we're going to have the links to the channel. We're going to have the links to your Patreon, and our you know, I mean, we don't normally do that for guests, but I don't want to piss him off, so let's just do what he asks.
And one question before we close.
Yeah.
One final question. I'm about to turn 40 this year. At the end of this year, do you think it is likely in my lifetime that human beings will set foot on Mars?
Yes.
Good question.
Yes.
Excellent question. Nice, excellent. That's a spectacular. That was the best possible question to end on. So thank you all for joining us, Reds. Thank you very much for coming, sir. And we look forward to having you on again. I think this was a great show. We will, Ansgar, what do we have coming up next? I've only got about 60 seconds, but what have we got coming up next week?
Yeah, so coming up, we have organ donation. We had to push that back. That's on the 11th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, and then at a normal 2 p.m. Eastern Standard that following Wednesday on the 12th, we have pushed back once again Disney and the art monopoly. So that's what we have coming up
And
next week.
and for the first time ever, our new show, A Stitch in Time, will be airing a week from today, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. We hope you guys will join us for that. Until then, once again, I'm Nicholas Lamar Soutter. With me, as always, is Ansgar. This was Reds Rhetoric discussing the space program. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
See you later.
Peace out, people.